It's 9 o'clock, and in 8 minutes' time, the funeral procession will begin from Kensington Palace, bearing the body of Diana, Princess of Wales, on the start of its journey to Westminster Abbey. Sally Magnuson is at Kensington Palace.
And people here are still pouring into the road in front of Kensington Palace here, hoping to get a glimpse of the gun carriage as it begins its journey, the journey that will take it to the Abbey. The mood here, it's not really somber, it's quiet, it's reflective. You're struck by really the silence. Despite the number of people here, the thousands of people on the streets, people are talking quietly. There's a sense of camaraderie though, people happy to talk to each other, to strangers, about their stories, their thoughts, their feelings. And there's now a palpable sense of anticipation. People know that we're only a few moments away from the moment when the gun carriage will emerge. Some of them have been waiting here for many, many hours. They've been walking around the gardens where there's that vast ocean of flowers that has so amazed people who have come to see it here, people who didn't expect in many cases to be as overcome as they have been, seeing the tributes, the flowers, the candles. Each tree in the garden there has become a shrine. People becoming quietly more excited as the minutes tick away.
And now let's go down to the Mall. Krishna Gurumurthy is there.
The crowd here has markedly swelled in the last hour. A police spokesman just told me they believe they've now topped the million figure along the route in London itself. The mood here, I think, has changed rather in that time as well. What I described earlier as quiet and reflective has become rather more serious, and I think there is an increasing sense of anticipation that this week of mourning is going to become altogether more real when people do see that funeral procession and the cortege, and in particular, of course, the gun carriage go past. People are still silent and sad.
It's only a few minutes now until here at Kensington Palace we shall see the start of the funeral cortege, the coffin of the princess draped in the royal standard with flowers from members of the family, drawn by 6 horses, come down this road. Just the horses of the King's troop and the bearers who will carry the coffin when it reaches Westminster Abbey. Very silent now. Outside Westminster Abbey, the first members of the congregation, all of them invited guests, are arriving at the entrance to the Abbey, though the doors of the Abbey won't open until 9:30. But at 9:05, the first early arrivals. Many of the congregation of 2,000 or so people who worked for charities, people who were friends of the family, many visitors from the United States, where the princess had many friends. And this whole crowd, over 1 million strong, waiting for the moment which can now only be a few seconds away, when the princess's body is seen for the first time at the start of this funeral procession. The huge, towering building of Kensington Palace there, which looms over the west side of Hyde Park. And this, the private Palace Avenue, walled on both sides, that leads straight up to the palace itself, where the princess had her apartments, along with other members of the royal family. Princess Margaret lives there, and the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, and the Duke and Duchess of Kent. And her sister, Lady Jane Fellowes, the wife of the private secretary to the Queen, Sir Robert Fellowes, also has an apartment in this huge palace. And it was here that Queen Victoria was born. And now the 6 horses of the King's troop come into sight, pulling the gun carriage. And they're coming out of the private entrance of the palace towards the gates that stand at the bottom. You can just see the scarlet of the 6 guardsmen who will be carrying the coffin, and the 4 other guardsmen who make up the bearer party of the Welsh Guards. 3 horses at the front of this cortege. The lead driver and the sergeant commanding. And then 2 pairs of horses behind them. Led by mounted members of the Metropolitan Police in the front. Coffin with the royal standard and 3 wreaths of white lilies. One from her brother Charles Spencer, the other 2 from the 2 princes, her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry. And the crowds, as she came round the corner there, not silent, bless you, shouts, and throwing flowers towards the coffin. on each side of the coffin, the guardsmen of the Welsh Guards from the Prince of Wales Company, who've been brought here from security patrols in South Armagh, have been stationed in Crossmaglen for the last 6 months. And the tall figure at the back, their commanding officer, the adjutant of the 1st Battalion, Captain Richard Williams, himself a hero who was taken hostage by the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia in 1993 and won the Military Cross for protecting 100 civilians during the time he was there. And they are the only military presence, the Welsh Guards and the soldiers of the King's Troop of the Royal Horse Artillery. In a moment, the procession, which is coming down Kensington Road towards Kensington Gore, will turn to the left into Hyde Park and go along South Carriage Drive at the bottom end of the park. Every minute, as this cortege makes its way to Westminster Abbey, a single bell at the Abbey chimes to mark its progress. The royal standard over the coffin, fringed with a deep fringe of ermine, with the 3 wreaths of lilies from her brother and her 2 sons on the top. crowd here appears to block off the rest of the road that leads down towards the Albert Hall, and this is the point at which the funeral cortege will turn through Queen's Gate and into Hyde Park itself. Cortege moving at a slow walk along the south side of Hyde Park. It came in through Queen's Gate. It's now coming up towards Alexandra Gate, heading eastwards, parallel with Rotten Row, where the Princess herself used often to ride, on its way up to Hyde Park Corner. The Albert Hall in the background there, where she herself went quite recently to hear Pavarotti sing for one of her favorite charities, draped in black. It was here in Hyde Park, too, that she listened in the pouring rain to that famous concert of the Three Tenors with Pavarotti. And a huge crowd, 20 deep or more, is lining the route at this point. The gates of the Abbey here at Westminster are just opening, and the first members of the congregation filing in through the west door. During the past week, they've been finding the princess's friends, people who were known to her through her work, and contacting them and asking them if they could come here today. But it's the millions others that are lining the route that perhaps are the real congregation for these events. People who've come from right across the United Kingdom, some of whom have been here most of the week to mark the moment. She goes through Coalbrookdale Gate, Coalbrookdale being one of the gates that divides the South Carriage Drive. We're looking down now into South Carriage Drive, that little pavilion on the left that guards one of the gates that allow the public through into the park. Crowds on each side now silent as the cortege passes. The gate is passing, the Prince of Wales gate. And the procession is now about halfway along Hyde Park on its way to Hyde Park Corner. See the gun below the coffin there, because this is of course a proper gun carriage used for the ceremonial events that the King's Troop take part in. It was Queen Victoria who was the first monarch to be given a funeral of this kind using a gun carriage, and since then Edward VII and George V and George VI and Sir Winston Churchill and the Duke of Windsor and Earl Mountbatten of Burma have all had their coffins carried in this way through the streets of London. But never a funeral procession followed by so many hundreds of thousands of people. Not just those lining the route, but the people behind, following to see if they can catch up with the procession later on. A few flowers being thrown at the leading horse there. The horses were specially trained during the past week, having flowers thrown at them so that if this did happen during the procession, they wouldn't become alarmed. So you don't need to worry for the horses. They've been trained for this moment and for the tributes that are being paid. Moments of private grief along the route of the procession as the public mourns the princess. And as the procession goes up Hyde Park, here at Westminster Abbey. The congregation for the funeral service itself continues to arrive here. And for the service, the special service that's been arranged today, Tom Fleming is inside the Abbey.
This old Abbey has witnessed a rich share of this nation's history.
Here, Tom Fleming at the moment, but inside the Abbey, the crystal chandeliers lit and the congregation assembling as the funeral cortege, which has another 1.25 hours to travel before it reaches Westminster Abbey, continues on its journey along the bottom end of Hyde Park. Rain Spencer, the stepmother of the Princess of Wales, arriving at the west door of the Abbey. Now the Comtesse de Chabrun, pausing to look at the flowers outside.
Prime ministers, ex-prime ministers, archbishops, all arriving side by side. This old abbey here has witnessed a rich share of this nation's history in the making. Great scenes of splendor and rejoicing, moments of heartbreaking remembrance. Beginnings and endings have both been marked in a building familiar to every visitor to Britain from far across the world. Today, the Abbey will be the setting for something quite unique. It will become, for a brief hour, at 11 o'clock, the focus of a whole people's remarkable outpouring of love and grief. But it will become, too, a place where that grief is transformed to thanksgiving for the life of a young woman that the whole world took to its heart. A place where a most unusual blend of words and music will turn our week-long sadness to hope and point to the future, as well as letting us take our tender farewell of someone who loved life and people and was a devoted mother to the boy who, one day, may be crowned king here in Westminster Abbey.
Outside the west door, more arrivals. A group of Chelsea pensioners there. There's going to be a wide range of people, most of them drawn from friends from public life, that's to say people she met in her work, and then close members of the family. People from the arts world, from the world of fashion, from the world of music. All those things that lifted her spirits. And summoned here very much at the last minute, and her brother there, Earl Spencer, Charles Spencer, who's arranged the family side of this service and who'll be giving the memorial address in the Abbey, escorted by one policeman, driving down the Mall on his way to the Abbey. And there are members of the media coming, as well as of the music world. And
the service for which this congregation is arriving this morning will be an unusual and a very fitting and moving blend of the traditional with the modern. It blows apart some of the artificial barriers that tend to exist in the ecclesiastical way of thinking. There will be the essential elements of a Church of England funeral service. There will be the familiar scripture sentences sung by the choir, the prayers led by the Archbishop of Canterbury, the words of commendation spoken by the Dean. But there will also be poems read by Diana's two sisters, a tribute by a younger brother, Earl Spencer, and he's proved himself in recent days to be someone who says exactly what he thinks. Verdi, sung by the BBC singers, and Lynn Dawson, the most talented young British soprano who's flown in from Berlin especially to be here. A popular song from Elton John, touchingly rewritten in the last few days, especially for this occasion. An incredibly moving piece by John Taverner, a song for Athene, written originally 4 years ago for a young girl he heard reading Shakespeare here in the Abbey, a girl killed soon after in a cycling accident. It incorporates the words of William Shakespeare's epilogue to Hamlet and the words of the Orthodox funeral service. This will be a service put together in 48 hours. No one asked to participate said no, whatever the logistical problems. The sub-organists, the lay clerks and choristers have all volunteered to come back from their summer vacation. Some have had to fly back thousands of miles to get here. So this family funeral in the inevitably royal setting of the Abbey will itself be a fitting tribute from a lot of different people of different backgrounds and different ages to the esteem and love in which this young woman, Diana, Princess of Wales, was held.
The cortege with the royal standard still on its way down South Carriage Drive through the thick ranks of mourners at the south side of Hyde Park. The standard with the lilies on it and the fringe of ermine, heraldic ermine that is, a piece of linen sewn onto the royal standard with crosses on it to distinguish it from a normal standard. And inside the Abbey, still more guests arriving. There's Richard Branson, a close friend of the Princess, who's been talking publicly about her during the week. We saw earlier Baroness Thatcher. We saw a brief glimpse of William Hague, the new leader of the Conservative Party. Paddy Ashdown and his wife, the leader of the Liberal Democrats. The leaders of the main parties were asked on the basis that those who went to the cenotaph service in November would be here and not others. a state funeral of the kind we're accustomed to would have far more people in uniform than we have here, just one or two people you see in uniform, but they're as private guests. But most of the people culled from a wide range. Robert Runcie, the Archbishop of Canterbury, coming in, who married them in St. Paul's, the Princess and the Prince of Wales 16 years ago, and will be taking part in this service today, reading some of the prayers. Virginia Bottomley behind, the former Secretary of State for Health. The Cabinet Secretary, Sir Robin Butler, the tall figure with the grey hair, coming in. And Bill Deeds there, just a brief glimpse. Robin Cook, the Foreign Secretary, and William Hague on his right, leader of the Conservative Party. Bill Deeds, with whom she did so much work for mines in recent months. And the charity workers are already assembling now, waiting to join the procession. John Prescott, the deputy leader of the Labour Party. Sir Edward Heath, the stooping figure there, just disappearing through the door, or the gateway. When I say these names, it sounds as though this is a state funeral in the old sense, but of course these are the faces that we know. Many of the people among them are people who are just private friends of the Princess, or people who worked in her charities. But among them these distinguished figures, Lord Callaghan, the former Labour Prime Minister, Baroness Jay on the left, who's spoken often of the Princess. She worked with her in the black hat there. She worked with her in the AIDS charities and has talked about her work. Ivor Richards, Lord Richards, the leader of the Labour Party in the House of Lords. So there is a wide range of people coming here, and these other charity workers are gathering at the Mall. They're going into the road, Stableyard Road, from which they will emerge later to follow the cortege. They go round the back here, and when they come out, it'll be out of Marlborough Street onto the Mall. Each of the 110 charities that she supported, at one point she cut them back to half a dozen in the last year or so, but each of them has been invited to send 5 representatives here under the towering statue of Queen Victoria, who looks up the Mall towards Trafalgar Square. And all the time, at a slow pace, drawn by its 6 dark bay horses, with the rumble of the wheels and the click of their hooves, this sad procession works its way through London towards the Abbey. And as it goes, on each side, the crowds look and watch. Some take photographs, some pray, some are in tears. All of them come here simply to pay their homage, and thousands others there watching in Hyde Park on the television monitors. the father of Dodi Al-Fayed, Muhammad Al-Fayed, the owner of Harrods, the London store, whose son became a friend of the princess in the last months, and who buried his son at the Regent's Park Mosque on Sunday under Muslim tradition within 24 hours of their death together in that car crash in Paris. The Speaker of the House of Commons, Betty Boothroyd, applause for Pavarotti, who arrives, that unmistakable figure, who said earlier in the week that he was grieving too much to be able to come here, but then changed his mind. Though he won't be singing in the Abbey, unlike Elton John, of course, who will be singing the song that he specially wrote. Paddy Ashdown been talking to people outside, and David Steele, the former leader of the Liberal Democrat Party. And these VIPs are being directed to seats in the Abbey, but the rest of the congregation is just sitting where they choose, to keep to a minimum the formalities involved. And outside, nearly an hour into its journey, approaching the end of Hyde Park and coming towards the Hyde Park Arch, is the coffin of the princess. The Duke of Edinburgh, alone in the royal car with the royal standard flying, leaves Buckingham Palace on his way to the Abbey. Elton John on the right there. Elton John, who will be singing with his partner David Furnish beside him. Elton John, who the princess at the funeral of Versace was comforting, and George Michael, the singer, on the right. with the beard, Elton John, who's rewritten his famous song Candle in the Wind that was written for Marilyn Monroe for today, and was here yesterday afternoon practicing in the Abbey. And a world away from the life of those people, those distinguished people who've come here in the Abbey, at Horse Guards outside St. James's, towards Horse Guards, the charity workers who will be following the procession are just moving up so that they're ready to join it when it comes from Buckingham Palace along the Mall towards them. This is the entrance to Marlborough Road, and St. James's Palace is on the left. We're looking now through the gates of Hyde Park with the Wellington Museum on the left there. The carriage has left the park itself and now crosses Hyde Park Corner, going under the Wellington Arch. The Duke of Wellington himself, after whom this arch is named, had a memorable state funeral himself in the streets of London in 1852. Still the flowers rain before the procession. Otherwise, everything is silent and still. These huge wrought iron gates on the arch are usually closed. They open very rarely for a special occasion like this. And the cortege will come through here and then turn to the left and start on its journey down Constitution Hill, which will take it all the way along the side of the huge gardens of Buckingham Palace. The high wall where the garden parties take place every year on the one side, and on the other the green acres of Green Park. The Prime Minister, Tony Blair, and Cherie Blair on his left, you can just see disappearing behind the flowers and being greeted there at the entrance to the Abbey. Tony Blair, who many say caught the public mood early on when he heard the news of the death of the princess, and ever since has been urging that there should be a big public celebration of this kind, while also saying that there was no reason for criticism of the Queen. He's followed in by the actor Tom Conti, you can just see perhaps at the top left of the screen. There on the right, passing the tomb of the unknown warrior. And the Blairs were out this morning. They left number 10 Downing Street, went out into Whitehall and talked to people who were waiting, commiserated with them, said what a sad day this was. Krista Berg, the singer, perhaps the princess's greatest favourite. Henry Kissinger, the former Secretary of State, and Lord Snowdon on his left. Henry Kissinger, who was with her at a fundraising dinner in New York just a few weeks ago and was a great admirer of hers. Lord Attenborough, Richard Attenborough, involved with her in a number of charities. And Sheila Sims, his wife, beside him. Clive James, from one of the representatives of the media here, who was a personal friend of the princess. The organ music playing ever since the doors of the Abbey own. Ruby wax there. And at Buckingham Palace, Her Majesty the Queen, Prince Andrew on the right, Prince Edward on the far left, and Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, and other members of the royal family come out from Buckingham Palace into the courtyard, and we think are going to come not to follow the procession, but simply to see it pass the gates of the palace before they make their own separate way down to Westminster Abbey. This is the point at which the royal family will see the cortege at the bottom of Constitution Hill, where the gates to the palace are. Princess Margaret now. And other members of the royal family, the Duke of Kent on the right, Sir Angus Ogilvy on the left, Princess Alexandra in the centre. Queen, Princess Margaret and other members of the royal family standing outside the gate of Buckingham Palace. Another departure from any known protocol, another sign that they wish to be seen to be taking part in the nation's mourning, not through the formalities of ceremony only, but through demonstrations of their own feelings of sadness. A harrowing moment to come as they watch the coffin of someone who was their relation, daughter-in-law, sister-in-law, and mother to the future heir to the throne, the Duchess of Kent, there with her children. The Duchess of York, with her back to us, the unmistakable long blonde hair, and Tim Taylor, who's married to Lady Helen Windsor. Inside the Abbey, there are other arrivals. Madame Chirac, the wife of the French president, who himself is not here, but who spoke movingly about the princess in the immediate aftermath of the events of Sunday. Princess Beatrice, the oldest daughter of the Duchess of York. Princess Margaret standing beside her. So the whole royal family. Viscount Linley on the right, Prince Edward on the left behind the Queen. And this whole family firm, as they call themselves, must have been very moved, perhaps surprised by the scale of public grief that they've seen. Certainly they've been responding to it over these last few days, and now are preparing to pay a kind of informal homage to the princess as she passes. It was the Queen who said yesterday, "I want to pay tribute to Diana myself, first of all. She was an exceptional and gifted human being. In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness. I admired and respected her for her energy and commitment to others, and especially for her devotion to her two boys." And she went on, "No one who knew Diana will ever forget her. Millions of others who never met her but felt they knew her will remember her. I, for one, believe that there are lessons to be drawn from her life and from the extraordinary and moving reaction to her death. I share in your determination to cherish her memory." The cortege is now reaching the bottom end of Constitution Hill and coming out in front of Buckingham Palace, and will shortly pass the Queen and the royal family. A bow from the Queen as the coffin passed the west side of Buckingham Palace. The Duchess of York, who was one of her closest friends, who joined the royal family as she did. And those members of the royal family will now go separately by car to the Abbey. We have not yet, of course, seen the Prince of Wales, or Prince William, or Prince Harry. They weren't there at Buckingham Palace, and it is said they may be joining at some stage the funeral procession itself, but for the moment we do not know. A simple card on the first of those reads, just saying, you may have been able to read it, Mummy. Someone paying their own tribute, the skirl of the pipes and a Scottish lament sounding out from across the crowd. Otherwise, this procession has had no music. The gun carriage turns now into the grand processional route of the Mall, down which so many processions have passed, down which Princess Diana herself went on her wedding day, cheered by the crowds on either side. and mourners standing thick to left and to right. At St. James's Palace, the Prince of Wales, behind him Prince William, Prince Harry, walking down towards the Mall, so it does look as though they will join in the procession, in the funeral cortege. Charles Spencer, Earl Spencer, on the left of Prince William. He'll be giving the address later on, and the Duke of Edinburgh. Everyone's thoughts must surely be with those two boys, her sons, as they wait for the funeral cortege to make its way down the long, open road of the Mall to where they will first see it as it comes into sight by St. James's Palace. This cortege is now halfway along the Mall. And still as it goes, silence from the mourners watching, the million who've come here to London, tears as it goes past. a few flowers still being thrown. And it's now about halfway along the Mall, on its way to the road that joins from St. James's Palace, where waiting are the close members of the family. The Duke of Edinburgh on the left talking to Prince William, Charles Spencer, the brother in the centre, Prince Harry, and the Prince of Wales on the right, and they start walking down the road towards the Mall. And then walk forward and join as principal mourners the funeral cortege. And behind them, taking up their place, the 500 members of charities who benefited from the princess's work, and so increased fivefold in size, but still led by this simple gun carriage, the Welsh guardsmen on either side who'll be the bearers for the coffin when it reaches the Abbey, and the gun carriage with the coffin. The cortege continues on down the Mall towards Horse Guards Parade on the right, where it will leave the Mall itself and turn down towards Whitehall. And here are some of the many hundreds of people from the charities that the princess supported. There are all kinds of charities represented here, inevitably many of them charities connected with children, but then all the other interests that she had. The ballet companies, for instance, the English National Ballet, the London City Ballet, the Red Cross, with whom she worked on the campaign against mines, and Relate, the charity that tries to mend broken marriages. Watching the coffin as it goes past, the chief rabbi, Jonathan Sachs, who's come here to pay tribute because he can't go into the Abbey today, Saturday, a Jewish holy day. The groups of charity workers, some of them being pushed in wheelchairs, some with sashes, all of them told not to dress formally for this occasion any more than the royal family themselves dressed formally, but in lounge suits. Some children among them, some of them carrying flowers, Douglas Bader Foundation, Bernardo's, Child Accident Trust, Sports Association for the Disabled, Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital, the Leprosy Mission, Leukemia Research Appeal, London Symphony Orchestra. Many of these the princess gave up in favour of her 6 favourite charities, and one of them, who may be here today, the All England Lawn Tennis and Croquet Club, said, rather wryly. I don't really think she was that interested in croquet. Mrs. Shan Kidd, the princess's mother, and her two sisters, Lady Jane Fellows and Lady Sarah McCorkadale, with her arriving, Lady Sarah on the left of your picture there and being greeted by the Dean. And both the sisters will be reading poems in the service. Sir Robert Fellows behind the tall figure, the Secretary to the Queen. Mrs. Shan Kidd was separated from the princess's father when she was only 6 years old, causing the whole family and the princess, as she herself said, much turmoil and unhappiness in her early years. So this, the close family of the princess, led to their places as the congregation is almost all in place, though it will be another 25 minutes or so before the funeral service itself begins. And we still await here in the Abbey the arrival of the Queen and then of the children of the princess. Still walking down the distinctive red road of the Mall before turning off to Horse Guards. The Duke of Edinburgh on the left, Prince William with his head bowed, Charles Spencer, the little figure of the red-headed Prince Harry, and the Prince of Wales. The Queen Mother driving by car to the Abbey. She didn't come out into the forecourt to see the cortege go by. It was at her house, Clarence House, that the princess spent the days after her engagement and the day before her marriage. And she was known to be very saddened by the subsequent breakup of that marriage. Now the cortege veers away from the Mall into the Horse Guards approach road. coming down from the gap there in the long white buildings of Carlton House Terrace. Swollen with the ranks of the 500 charity workers who've been chosen by their charities from the 110 charities that had the princess as their patron, or with which she was closely associated. And behind her two sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, who are said to have chosen for themselves to walk in this procession, daunting particularly for the young 12-year-old, soon to be 13, Prince Harry, on his father's right. This must be one of the quietest and the saddest processions that this great open space of horse guards has ever witnessed. Usually this is the scene of bands playing, horses with their bits jangling, drums, marching feet, orders shouted. Here today, it just sees the simple gun carriage and the same heavy crunch of the guardsmen's feet as they walk on the gravel approach towards Horse Guards Arch. A brief private moment in the dark of the archway, a hand put on Prince Harry's shoulder and then out again into the glare of the sunlight and 1,000 eyes on them as the cortege emerges from Horse Guards and will turn to the right, down Whitehall, towards the Cenotaph Memorial and on to Parliament Square. The Queen now leaving Buckingham Palace on her way to Westminster Abbey, and uniquely now the Union flag will be flown at half-mast from the palace staff. As she goes down towards Birdcage Walk. The Union flag raised and then lowered to half-mast, where it will stay for the funeral. Another example of a breach of what is thought to be the all-important protocol in response to the public mood. And so the coffin is nearing the final stages of its journey to the Abbey. Coming down Whitehall now, past all those government buildings. The Cabinet Office and the Welsh Office and the Home Office, and down towards Downing Street. And still Prince William, with his head hung, walking next to his grandfather. Prince Harry on his father's right, and Charles Spencer in the centre. And the Queen coming down Birdcage Walk towards Westminster. Her part in today's proceedings will end at the Abbey. The members of the royal family are not going to the final stage, to Althorpe House, for the burial. The cortege reaches the cenotaph and is saluted. A memorial to the dead of the First and Second and subsequent wars.
We love you, Diana! Always.
the Queen Mother, and the Queen, and Prince Edward at the west door of the Abbey. The Dean, who will be conducting the service, greets them at the door, as he will later the Spencer family. And the procession is now coming into Parliament Street, the final approach towards Parliament Square. The Very Reverend Dr. Wesley Carr, the Dean of Westminster, escorting the Queen, and the Queen Mother walking with a stick with her grandson beside her. And they make their way to their places in the nave as the coffin enters the final stages of this long and moving journey to Westminster Abbey. the great procession of charity workers who have been following the cortege ever since halfway down the Mall, and who will now leave it to go separately to St. Margaret's to listen to the service there, as the coffin itself is borne alone, followed by the members of the family, to the west door of the Abbey. Coming down Broad Sanctuary now, the final approach road, in this brilliant sunshine, with these people who've come here 2-3 days ago to stand here and mourn as their princess passes. And as the cortege turns towards the west door of Westminster Abbey, the gun carriage and the guardsmen who will bear the coffin inside, we join Tom Fleming, who is in the Abbey.
On a September day in 1982, I described the scene on the first official visit overseas alone of Diana, Princess of Wales. She was 21, and she was representing Her Majesty the Queen at the funeral of a beautiful and much-loved princess who had died some days before in a tragic car accident, Princess Grace of Monaco. Little did I imagine that 15 years later to the month, I would be watching the arrival of a simple coffin draped with another royal standard, bearing the body of that beautiful and much-loved young princess of our own country, killed 6 days ago in a tragic car accident. The bearer party, found by men of the Prince of Wales Company from the 1st Battalion, the Welsh Guards, will now lift the coffin from the gun carriage. Utter silence in the sanctuary. The coffin surmounted by family flowers. The little prince's wreath to the right. And slowly, the coffin will be raised. To be carried now so gently and with infinite care through the railings heaped with flowers and messages to the great west door of Westminster Abbey. Beyond that door, all now await the beginning of a service which will become, for an hour, the focus of a nation's remarkable outpouring of grief and affection. A service which marks the first and public part of a funeral that will end later this afternoon, quietly and far from the public gaze, in a green corner of Northamptonshire. coffin the chief mourners, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. Earl Spencer, Princess's younger brother, Prince William, her elder son, Prince Harry, will be 13 in 9 days' time, his father, the Prince of Wales. Coffin received by the Dean of Westminster, the Very Reverend Dr. Wesley Carr. Through into this building which has seen so many occasions of history, so many occasions of heartbreaking remembrance.